welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into an incredibly visceral story called Pink Mist. We're going to look at how a truly chilling psychological thriller can be built right out of the raw, unflinching reality of combat trauma. This isn't just your traditional war story. It actually operates as this profound, terrifying deep dive into the human mind under unbearable pressure. We're exploring exactly what happens when the battlefield quite literally follows a soldier home. We're kicking things off with this incredibly jarring line directly from the text. Gotta love that pink mist. Man, it's a brutal thing to hear, right? It immediately drops us into this dark, fractured reality. Uttered by a fellow soldier just moments after an unspeakable act of violence, this single, deeply cynical phrase becomes the absolute anchor for everything that follows. It completely sets the tone for the heavy psychological lifting this narrative is about to do, and it marks the exact moment where the protagonist's descent into madness truly begins. Okay, let's introduce our protagonist, Drake. He's a former Army sniper. Now, to the outside world, he physically survived the war in Iraq and made it home in one piece. But his actual reality is completely shattered. Physical survival here is really just a mask covering a deeply fractured mental landscape. As you'll see, it becomes painfully clear that the war didn't end for him when his deployment finished. It simply relocated. It moved off the physical battlefield of the Middle East and took up permanent residence right inside his mind. So Drake's breakdown doesn't just happen all at once. It's a slow burn, and it's fascinating to watch how this psychological unraveling happens step by step. The author masterfully paces this arc, moving from a sudden, impossible moral choice on a hill in Iraq to a violent mutiny between partners to a completely hollow return home. And then the trauma just kind of ferments over time, eventually leading to a terrifying ultimatum and a full-blown hallucination back in civilian life. This slow progression is basically the spine of the entire narrative structure, showing us how unprocessed trauma inevitably boils over. Now, what's really crucial here is the inciting incident that sets Drake's trauma in motion, and it requires us to look at an absolutely horrific, unimaginable situation. While tracking a terrorist leader, HQ delivers a brutal new order: eliminate the man's 3-year-old son to, quote, send a message. Drake physically steps away. He absolutely refuses to pull the trigger on a toddler, but his spotter, a guy named Brock the Beast King, complies without hesitation. He fires the heavy .50 caliber rifle, creating that horrific pink mist. And this impossible choice triggers Drake's immediate mutiny, resulting in Drake actually drawing his own sidearm and executing his partner right then and there. By examining the prologue, what's so striking is the physical manifestation of severe PTSD. Just look at these visceral sensory details. Drake wakes up tasting liquid copper in his mouth, his vision reduced to this shadowy kaleidoscope. His body reacts as if he's actively under attack. His blood pressure plummets in a cold sweat. In his panic, he's slammed against a wall, knocking down his Purple Heart and his Haley High diploma. The shattering of these specific achievements, one representing military sacrifice, the other domestic normalcy, it perfectly symbolizes how trauma ruthlessly destroys both his past and his present. This brings us to this ominous closing thought that cements the inescapable haunting Drake is facing. A shadowy figure enters his room and strikes him down, a figure he recognizes as the Beast, the very real manifestation of the spotter he killed in Iraq. The quote, "Hello, darkness, my old friend," totally captures his terrifying resignation to this fate. The darkness isn't just an absence of light here. No, it's a very real, violent entity that has returned for him. It's the ultimate symptom of his shattered psyche coming back to collect its due. And this brilliantly illustrates the core duality of the narrative. We see the stark contrast between Drake's external and internal life. Externally, he seemingly moved on, right? He didn't re-enlist, he moved back to his hometown of Haley's Crossing, got married, and tried to just blend back into society. But internally, he never actually left that sniper shack overlooking the valley. He is permanently trapped in the devastating moment of witnessing that horrific violence in the pink mist. It's a brilliant way to show just how invisible profound trauma can be to the outside world. Section 2, The Cynical Soldier, breaking down Chapter 1. Let's move into this section and see how the author establishes Drake's jaded perspective. Jumping backwards slightly in the timeline to a chapter called Desert Barbecue, we really have to understand the rules of engagement, or ROE. Now, Drake launches into a highly politically charged internal rant about these rules, completely furious that policies are preventing soldiers from engaging clear threats. We're looking at this impartially as a crucial piece of character development. It perfectly frames the intense frustration of a soldier on the ground who feels his life is constantly endangered by abstract rules made by people far away from the actual danger. It establishes his deep cynicism long before the inciting incident even takes place. The tension really ramps up from the incredibly dangerous reality of their daily operations. They're out on a simple, peacekeeping cash drop to local sheiks, a mission Drake finds completely worthless. While sitting there totally exposed, they spot a 19-year-old insurgent on a cell phone up on a nearby hill, clearly calling in an ambush on their position. But because of those strict rules of engagement we just talked about, they are forced to hold their fire. They have to knowingly pack up and drive straight into a trap, taking the highly vulnerable desert route back to base. So this mundane threat instantly explodes into the desert barbecue ambush. The author structures this as a masterclass in tactical chaos that unfolds in 4 terrifying steps. First, the string of IEDs detonates, violently crumpling the lead trucks. Second, a bongo truck rushes out as a deliberate distraction. Third, a heavy, bedded-in firefight breaks out from a nearby junkyard. And finally, the massive counterattack arrives from 3 Little Bird helicopters, providing air support. The sensory overload of this entire sequence is absolutely staggering. Amidst that deafening chaos of crumpled metal, black smoke, and ringing ears from the IED blast, the author gives us this incredibly surreal sensory detail. Drake notes that he smelled, strangely, daisies. Just moments before, he admits to completely losing bodily control out of pure, unadulterated fear. So this sudden olfactory hallucination is a fascinating look at how the human brain fragments during extreme violence. It's desperately trying to process an environment that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. We then see this wild, almost absurd contrast in how these soldiers actually cope with the madness. On one side, you have the grunt's chaos. Drake is trapped in the gunner hatch, firing wildly in a complete and total panic. But on the other side, you have the NCO, Staff Sergeant Vaughn. And Vaughn is chillingly calm. I mean, in the middle of an active ambush, with bullets flying everywhere, he literally opens an MRE and starts eating cold ravioli. He just sits there and tells Drake to enjoy the BBQ while they wait for the helicopters to finish the job. This dark humor injected by Vaughn perfectly captures the absurdist, cynical coping mechanisms required to survive a deployment like this. When Drake confusedly asks why they're waiting for the quick reaction force after the helicopters have already destroyed the threat, Vaughn simply deadpans, "Somebody has to tow us out of here, dipshit." It's an insane coping mechanism, but a necessary one, right? They literally have to normalize the absolute insanity happening all around them just to make it through to the next day. Section 3, The Inescapable Ghost, Bringing the Trauma Full Circle. Let's see how the author ties all of this together. Bringing all this trauma full circle to the present day, the narrative reaches its absolute breaking point. The hallucination of the Beast, his dead spotter, takes everything from Drake, forcing him into a waking nightmare at a local civilian baseball field. The Beast forces Drake to peer down the scope of an imaginary .50 caliber rifle at a 6-year-old girl doing cartwheels. The ultimatum is devastating. Complete the mission he failed to do in Iraq, or watch his own 8-year-old son die the exact same way. It blends his past trauma seamlessly into his present reality, forcing him to face the impossible choice all over again. He responds by turning the imaginary rifle on his dead friend, killing him a second time. Connecting this back to an ominous closing thought from Chapter 1, the pieces finally fall into place. After surviving the desert BBQ ambush, Drake reflects that not every incident ended so well. It's a chilling realization. The author is essentially telling us that for Drake, the war never actually ended. The battleground just shifted from the scorching deserts of Iraq to the Little League baseball fields of his hometown. The ghosts followed him back, and they are demanding a reckoning. This brings us right to the very core of the story. Past the visceral, sensory details and the cynical worldviews, we are left with a profoundly unsettling reality about the psychological toll of combat. It leaves us with one final, provocative question to chew on. How does a soldier leave a war when the war refuses to leave him? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.